Witaj w podcaście MIT Sloan Management Review Polska. Inspirujemy liderów przyszłości.
Thank you very much. It's very early and dark here in Boston, but I hope you're having a good conference so far. I wish I could be there in person. I have visited Warsaw several times, and my wife is part Polish. In fact, she'll occasionally say something in Polish, put piec to our dog, and dziękuję. I'm not sure exactly what that means. And of course, the very important na zdrowie, panie. So I'll be talking about how AI affects customer relationships. And this is based on a new book that I just finished a couple of months ago called The New Science of Customer Relationships. And the subtitle of this book is Fulfilling the One-to-One Promise. We were supposed to have one-to-one marketing a long time ago. We started with database marketing in the 1980s in MIT Sloan Management Review, which your conference organizer publishes in Poland. There was an article in 1991, almost 35 years ago, called Marketing in the Age of Addressability. And the two professors said, with AI, we'll be able to figure out who the best customers are and personalize our marketing and so on. A couple of years later, an academic and a marketer published a book about one-to-one marketing, which was supposedly coming any moment now. Then we started to get e-commerce with banner ads, customer relationship marketing in the 90s, moved to the cloud, late 90s, chatbots came around in the 2000s, not very good ones. We started search-based ads in 2006. We started to get targeting with AI in the 2010s, but it wasn't until 2022 that we really could personalize every ad if we were good at it. But we didn't really get this one-to-one marketing that we were promised. And I don't know about you, the vast majority of ads that I receive are not well targeted to me. We have this annoying thing called retargeting. This picture of a car is for a Toyota that I recently bought. I like it a lot. It's in this exact same color as in the ad. But for weeks after I bought it, I would get these ads for buy, a Toyota Crown Signia. It's just really quite annoying. And, this very simplistic idea of, well, if you're interested once, you'll be interested for a while. It's really not very sophisticated. So I won't go through all these survey numbers, but basically they suggest we are not succeeding at how we do marketing and customer relationships. And even most organizations say they don't have a 360-degree view of their customers. Customers say they don't even want to share their data with businesses. 12% say, well, maybe if I could get personalized ads, I would share my data, or if I could get better products and services. But we're not getting this sort of value exchange, more value for more data and more personalization. Even the idea of a customer, it's very challenging for organizations. Is it a current buyer, someone who bought several years ago, a prospect, a potential buyer in a store, on a website, a potential buyer who just seems to be a likely candidate, maybe as an influencer, a customer. So companies, I think, even companies that really believe in customers and customer data and so on, often have difficulty deciding, what really is their customer. And we, in many cases, just are overwhelmed by the amount of data coming at us, all different types of data and lots of different channels and devices and customer touch points and transactional systems that manipulate that data. Now we have supposedly data platforms, but most organizations have multiple customer data platforms. All these seem to be growing faster than companies' ability to make sense of them. And the more customer and marketing data we have, the more complex it is to manage. So the question that we addressed in this book, I co-authored it with a long-term marketing writer, Jim Stern, is, is generative AI or agentic AI what it takes to really save the day and create better marketing? And we think there's potential, but it's not only those tools. In fact, if you really care about customer science, I love this little generative AI created image. I really tried to get it to put the human being under the microscope and not standing beside the microscope, but it's kind of an indication of the power and the frustration of generative AI. But we have to decide, what do we mean by customers? What information about them really matters? We have to get marketing and sales and customer service and the various other functions that touch customers to decide how they're going to use the information. We have to collect it, and we have to have good transactional systems, ERP and CRM, and so on. The information has to be made accessible and easy to access. We have to refine it over time. Customers change their addresses and their emails and their phone numbers and their names at times. We have to not just use generative AI, but it's, as I will argue in just a second, it's analytical AI. Some people call it traditional machine learning, but I don't really think that's a good name for it. That's what predicts the customer journey and predicts what customer is likely to respond to your ad or offer. And then generative AI can create personal ads and offers for that customer, and to understand how the customer feels about it in terms of what they say on social media and so on. And then agentic AI is what sort of strings it all together and orchestrates a relationship with a customer. We're just in the early days of that technology. So just to distinguish between analytical and generative AI, there are a lot of people who think, AI was invented in November of 2022 when ChatGPT came out. But if you're really interested in making money with AI, I often say it's analytical AI that will probably get you there first, unless you're a content generation company. But so in analytical AI, we're trying to predict unknown data from models based on known data. Generative AI, we're also predicting, but our purpose is to create new content, of course. Analytical AI, we're trying to predict a specific outcome. Generative AI, we're trying to create content better and faster than humans can. The methods are machine learning in both cases, but with different types of algorithms. With analytical AI, we're usually doing supervised learning, where we have labeled outcome data that we can use to train our model. And in generative AI, we have lots more data. We have these transformers that turn inputs into outputs, attention techniques that allow for understanding context of words and so on, and diffusion techniques for image creation. And that uses self-supervised learning. We don't have to train it because it's already, we already have the words for what it is. The big difference is analytical AI uses structured numerical data, rows and columns of numbers in most cases, and generative AI, of course, uses very large volumes of text or images, sometimes, a trillion pieces of text. And the value of analytical AI is making better decisions. Will that customer buy at that price? Will that customer respond to this offer? Is that customer likely to leave us as a customer? So we're trying to make better decisions through prediction. And in generative AI, of course, we're trying to create content more efficiently. So both are really important in marketing. If you think about the types of things we can do, I won't go into detail about this, but we can predict many things in the marketing environment with analytical AI. We can predict who will complete a marketing research survey, perform some initial analysis of the structured data, the numerical data coming out of it. We can predict fraud. We can predict what customer leads are most likely to result in a sale. We can predict which customers are likely to complain. Well, with generative AI, of course, we can create all sorts of documents, marketing plans. We can have a response to our marketing plan. We can understand what our customers are saying. We can create advertisements. We can create product descriptions. We can write the code. We can create the website. So the two of these are really very powerful. And I've made it my personal crusade to not let people forget about analytical AI. There's one major difference. I think generative AI is very easy to understand. We can all use it very easily. You issue a prompt and something comes back. Analytical AI requires typically a knowledge of statistics, and many people don't have that degree of knowledge. You often have to have a data scientist in your organization or some role like that to use it effectively. So that's one of the reasons why generative AI caught on so much faster than analytical AI did. The other thing I think that's very important, the other distinction that I want to make is this difference between individual generative AI marketing and enterprise level marketing. So as I suggested, one of the things about generative AI, it's very easy to use. So a lot of companies say to their employees, try this out, do a little experiment and see if you can write your blog posts better with it or your product descriptions or whatever. They don't typically measure. They don't put their own content in with the system. They don't really ever put it into production. So they have these individual oriented approaches aimed at individual marketers or an unorganized collection of marketers. They don't measure productivity. They don't really assess content quality. They just use a standard large language model, and they don't change the business process or the strategy or the business model or whatever. The enterprise approaches, I wrote an article about it last week with some people at Stanford, unfortunately not in MIT Sloan Management Review, which I write a lot for. This was in Harvard Business Review, right up the river, I guess, from MIT. And enterprise projects are aimed at an entire marketing function, or maybe create a new product or service for an external customer. The goal is to put it in production deployment so that everybody's using it. The metrics are organizational performance metrics like more revenue or lower cost or market share or measured productivity gains. In most cases, we use custom content with what's called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, where we add our proprietary content to the language model. We integrate it with our technology architecture. We redesign the business process, and that enables a new strategy or business model or new products and services. So you can see how that would be much more valuable. It's harder to do and more expensive to create. But what we argue in this article is that you should really be aiming more toward enterprise-related use cases or applications and less toward the individual ones. The individual ones are still good for kind of finding out what works, and you may get some value out of it, but typically not a lot of measured value. Okay, so I did this work with one of my Babson colleagues, who's a very well-published marketer. I'm an information systems person generally, but what we found is that if you're going to use generative AI, there are 4 ways to use it. And the two dimensions that really matter are what's your input? Is it general input, what's included already in the large language model, or is it custom input? Have you added your own proprietary content to it? As I said, in most cases with retrieval augmented generation or RAG. I don't know if there's a Polish translation of that or not, but it's getting very popular in large companies. Then from an output perspective, we have to decide, are we going to just use the output of a system unedited, unreviewed? That is, a fast way to do business, but risky. It's like a small boat or skiff, but probably not well suited for, important customer communications or even important internal communications. Maybe we'll summarize online reviews and social media using ChatGPT. It doesn't matter if it's terribly accurate or not. Or are we going for high levels of human augmentation? If we're going to sell a product and we have a product description, we should probably review it. One of my friends who's head of data science at a large retail chain in the US said, we tried generative AI to do that, but with the reviews, it took more time than it took just to write them ourselves. So that's going to be slower. It's probably better for our brains. There's a great article coming out of MIT called Your Brain on ChatGPT, which suggests that if you don't really review it and edit it and add to it and so on, your brain doesn't remember anything about it, and you're really not engaging with it at all. So I try to get my students to do that. It's not easy to get them to edit the output. They complain about it, but in general, I think it leads to a better outcome. And then if you have, custom inputs and high human augmentation of outputs, that's a very slow but very secure kind of battleship where we're important documents, maybe some important financial filing. We have to have content that reflects our organization, and we have to review it carefully. So this was an article in Harvard Business Review and another marketing journal in earlier this year about how should Gen AI fit your marketing strategy. And now we have agentic AI, which is still in the early days. It doesn't just inform or predict. It can do both of those things, but it takes digital actions based on capabilities of AI and other technologies, maybe search or APIs or something like that. Typically, it's going to perform a small task. If you have a large process, that's typically going to involve a collection of different agents working together, maybe even across organizations. We don't have too many of those yet, but I think we will soon. Agents can check on the quality of what other agents have done, which you often need to do because you can have hallucinations and so on with generative AI agents. Typically, we're doing research, some reasoning on that research, communication, maybe creating an email, code generation in many cases, and even completing a transaction. Most people don't yet trust, booking a trip that a set of agents has identified for them without reviewing it carefully, but maybe at some point we will. The goal in many cases is less human involvement, more flexibility, and higher productivity. But they do, as I say, involve hallucinations. There's some cybersecurity risks involved in agents, something called prompt insertion that inserts a prompt and wreaks havoc into your what your agent is trying to do. And early experiments say agents aren't quite there yet. Even running a small business, Anthropic tried running a store in their corporate headquarters, and it made all sorts of mistakes. But I think there's not much doubt these will get better, and they are going to be very important to marketers and other functions in the near future. So just a couple of examples. One I worked with a long time became the world's largest casino company. I don't know if there are any in Poland. It was called Harrah's. They merged with Caesars, so now it's called Caesars. A friend of mine, former Harvard Business School professor, became first chief marketing and operations officer and then became CEO in the late 90s. He said, we have all this data, but we're not using it. So he embarked upon a very impressive transformational plan. New transactional systems, new ERP, new CRM. He got customers to start playing across different casinos in different markets. They had a loyalty program, but they weren't using it effectively. So they refined it, called it Total Rewards, hired some of the smartest analytical people you can imagine. This was a huge success until 2015, when the problem is that they had made a decision that was not very analytical based on what shareholders insisted they do. They went private in a private equity transaction. They borrowed about $40 billion, and right at the 2008 recession, and not a good time to borrow $40 billion. And they had to declare bankruptcy, and they really stopped doing all of this work in customer science. There's a graphic here of all of the things that they did. It took, more than a decade to put some of these things in place, but unfortunately it stopped. But another example is still going and doing quite well. Sephora, in a very different business, cosmetics. They were one of the first cosmetics companies on the internet, the first to deal with mobile commerce. They have an innovation lab in San Francisco, a well-functioning loyalty program called Beauty Insider. They have a tool to scan your face and figure out what products fit your skin tone. Another one for if you have skin problems, it's called Skincare IQ. They have virtual artists that lets you change your facial appearance. I'm not sure why people want to do that unless they're planning cosmetic surgery. They have a chat bot in France. I don't think they spread it out to the US yet. At least they hadn't when I was doing the research for the book. And they work with a lot of external technology partners and sometimes invest in them. So they have also done this for the long term, but they continue to do it. So let me end with some lessons from what we found out about this book. AI, yes, generative, analytical, agentic, great, but you also need the right basic technology and data infrastructure. And a lot of organizations haven't really created that. Figure out what data you need and then analyze that data. Use all available technologies, including AI. The people that you hire to do this are really critical. As I said, for Caesars, for Sephora, they really hire people who know what they're doing, data scientists and analysts and smart analytical marketers and so on. You have to be in every channel these days and treat customers as if it doesn't matter what channel they came in on. Personalization is a never-ending battle, but I think it's one that can really pay off. And you have a number of organizations that have done it successfully. And don't think that you're ever finished with this. As in Caesars, if you stop, then all of these things don't really work anymore. So with that, I will stop. I know we're running a little bit late. I said that I was happy to answer questions via email if anybody has any. Thanks very much for your time and attention.
To był podcast MIT Sloan Management Review Polska. Przestrzeni dla liderów kreujących przyszłość swoich biznesów. Dołącz do naszej społeczności i zasubskrybuj nasz kanał. Więcej ciekawych treści znajdziesz na mitsmr.pl.